Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Sometimes the deepest betrayal does not begin with cheating. It begins the moment someone decides your love is useful, your loyalty is convenient, and your silence is expected. The most dangerous lies are not always loud. Sometimes they hide inside routine, trust, and the life you thought you were building together. And when the truth finally comes out, it does not just break your heart. It changes the way you see every promise that came before it. This is a story about what happens when respect dies behind a smile, and the person you trusted most never sees the cost until it is far too late.
Make sure you watch to the end because there's a lot to take from this one. Let's get into it.
I was 34 years old when my husband leaned in close at his own 40th birthday party and told me to leave. Not whisper close. Not the kind of private, careful close a husband uses when he wants to protect his wife's dignity. He was close enough for his mother to hear every word. Close enough for the woman from his office seated 2 chairs down to hear them too. He told me I was killing the mood. He said everyone could feel me watching him. Then he said it again, flatter the second time, like he was tired of having to explain something obvious to a child. Just go home, Monica. Let me have one night that is mine. I remember the warmth of the room, the amber light from the Edison bulbs, the polished concrete under my heels, the glass of sparkling water sweating in my hand. I remember the exact look on his face, too. He did not look angry. Anger would have meant he still felt something. He looked inconvenienced. He looked like I had become a problem sitting in the wrong place at the wrong time. What he did not know was that by then I had already seen enough to understand that I was not the one ruining his night. I was the person finally standing in the way of the version of his life he had been building behind my back. I did not argue with him. That was what he expected, I think. A scene. Tears. A raised voice he could point to later and call proof that I was unstable, dramatic, impossible. Instead, I looked at him, adjusted the strap of my purse on my shoulder, and said, "Okay." Then I turned and walked toward the side exit that opened onto the patio. I kept my back straight the whole way. Outside, the music from the hall dropped into a muffled pulse behind the glass. The patio lights were white and simple, 2 iron benches against the wall, a potted olive tree in the corner. The kind of pretty detail I had added because I knew the photographer would use that doorway for candid shots later. I took out my phone and made 4 calls. I called the venue coordinator first and gave her the authorization phrase we had set up when I signed the production sheet. Then I called the bartending service, the caterer, and the disc jockey. I did not ask anyone to create chaos. I did not tell them to throw people out or shut the building down. I simply withdrew my approval for everything that had been scheduled after the current service window. The premium bar extension was canceled. The late-night bites were canceled. The photographer's overtime block was canceled. The disc jockey's second set after cake cutting was canceled. The cake presentation itself was canceled because the bakery release form had my name on it and required my cue. By the time I slipped my phone back into my purse, every person I had hired knew exactly what to do. Not dramatically. Efficiently. The unraveling started 15 minutes later, and it was the kind that makes a room go strange before anyone knows why. The bartenders finished the round they were pouring, then stopped opening the reserve bottles that had been brought out for the second half of the night. The signature whiskey-tasting Damien had bragged about to his clients never happened because the add-on package had been tied to my final approval. A catering manager in black quietly redirected the dessert team and rolled the plated late-night menu back toward the kitchen. The photographer, who had already completed his contracted 4 hours, began packing lenses into padded cases instead of moving toward the cake table. The disc jockey announced a short break before the cake cutting, then never came back up with the dance set because there was no cake cutting to anchor the next segment. At first, people only looked mildly confused. Then the confusion sharpened. The room had been warm and expanding all evening, and suddenly it started folding in on itself. Guests who had been leaning into the night began checking watches, collecting wraps, lowering their voices. Damien stood in the middle of the room with a champagne flute in his hand, and a smile still half-formed on his face, while one piece after another failed to happen. I watched him realize, in slow order, that he was not losing a moment. He was losing control of the whole performance. He came after me fast. By the time the patio door pushed open behind me, His footsteps were already hard enough to tell me he had forgotten all about looking polished. He still had the champagne flute in his hand. "What did you do?" he asked. His voice was low, but it had that tight, stretched sound men get when they are trying not to shout in public. Behind him I could see people turning toward the door, pretending not to watch. "What you asked," I said. He looked back through the glass, then at me again. "Do not do that. Do not play games with me right now." He gestured toward the hall, toward the stopped bar, the quiet dance floor, the untouched cake. I meant step away. Get some air. I did not mean this. "You told me to leave," I said. Twice. For a second he just stared at me, as if he could not decide which part offended him more, that I had obeyed him or that I had done it without breaking. Then his mother appeared in the doorway behind him. Gloria did not say anything. She only looked from his face to mine and then passed him into the room. That silence was worse for him than any outburst could have been. He set the glass down so hard on the iron bench that the stem snapped. Then he turned and went back inside to salvage what he could. He had no idea yet that the real damage to his life had started 3 days earlier in my kitchen. 3 mornings before that party, I was sitting at our kitchen table in my robe with my second cup of coffee going cold beside my laptop and a spreadsheet open in front of me with 12 tabs. Green for confirmed, yellow for pending, red for anything that still needed me. That was how I organized everything, and Damien used to say he loved that about me. In the early years of our marriage, he said it like admiration. Later he said it the way people praise things they have started taking for granted. But that morning I still believed the years between us meant something solid. I still believed in the ordinary fabric of our life. The way he left his watch on the same small tray by the garage door every night. The way I knew his mother could not have shellfish and liked her tea sweet enough to make the spoon stand up. The way every Sunday evening I ironed the shirts he said made him feel like himself before a big week. The way I had been setting aside my own wants for almost 2 years so we could build a renovation fund for the kitchen and the downstairs bathroom. Because we had spent one late night standing in that cramped kitchen laughing about how one day we would tear out the crooked cabinets and do it right. Trust is not built in speeches. It is built in repetition, in small faithful things, in the quiet belief that the person beside you is treating the life you built together like something sacred. That Wednesday morning, Damien came out of our bedroom straightening his collar, already half in work mode, half in travel mode. He was heading to a regional conference in Louisville and was supposed to be gone overnight. He had been looking good lately, better than he had in years. He had dropped weight in the spring, started waking before dawn to go to the gym, started buying sharper shirts without asking if I thought we should wait until a sale. I had noticed all of it, and because I loved him, I had interpreted it kindly. I told myself it was confidence. A reset. A man taking himself seriously again at 40. He leaned over me, kissed the top of my head, and I caught a scent I did not recognize. Woodier than the cologne he had worn for years. Cleaner. More deliberate. New cologne. I asked. He smiled without really looking at me. A guy from the office recommended it. Said I needed something better for client events. Then he glanced at the spreadsheet and shook his head like I was performing some sweet, excessive miracle on his behalf. I swear, Monica, you make my life run. At the time, I let that land like affection. Later I understood it more accurately. That was exactly how he saw me. The person who made his life run. Not the woman who had built one with him. Not the wife whose name sat next to his on the house deed, the tax forms, the future. Just the system under the surface. The machinery. After he left, I sat back down and opened our joint credit card account because I needed the last 4 digits on a catering charge before I sent the final cake deposit. I was not digging. I was matching paperwork. That matters, because people like Damien always want to rewrite discovery as suspicion, as if betrayal only exists once the betrayed person starts looking hard enough to find it. The charge was small, $212, and if I had been moving faster I might have missed it. One night at the Meridian Suites in Franklin. I looked at the date once, then again. The 3rd weekend in September. The weekend Damien had told me he was driving to Louisville to see his college friend Russell, who had just had a second baby and was too exhausted to travel. I remembered that trip because I had packed him trail mix and a clean white undershirt and texted him to be careful on Interstate 65. I remembered him calling me on the way back, talking about how tired Russell looked and how good it had been to catch up. The hotel sat 30 minutes from our house. Nowhere near Louisville. I pulled up a map and stared at the location until the shape of the lie settled into something I could hold. When Damien called that night from his conference hotel, I answered on the second ring and sounded exactly like myself. Warm. Easy. Interested. I did not ask a single question. I had learned something important in that moment. If I wanted the truth, I was going to have to gather it before he knew I was standing anywhere near it. The next morning I started with the bank. I logged into our joint checking account and read 12 months of transactions line by line. Damien's payroll deposits came in twice a month, consistent and clean, except they had not been clean for as long as I had assumed. About 6 months earlier, the deposits had started arriving smaller by a few $100s each pay period. Not enough to set off alarms inside a busy marriage. Enough to vanish inside groceries, utility bills, dry cleaning, and the easy blur of middle life. I wrote down every shortfall. Then I logged into the old bank where Damien still kept the personal account he had opened before we married. He had never changed the login, because men who are certain they are unseen rarely bother updating the locks. The old account held a little money, nothing dramatic, but tucked under the same profile was a second checking account I had never seen before. 14 months old. That was the real container. The earlier withdrawals from our renovation fund had landed there, and 6 months ago he had started feeding it from skimmed payroll money too. The transaction history read like a second life written in debit form. A silver bracelet and earrings from a boutique downtown in October. A necklace from Green Hills in January. Lingerie in February from a brand I had never worn because it was made to be looked at, not lived in. A 3-night lake cabin rental in August on Percy Priest, charged while I was away at my cousin's bachelorette weekend. The numbers themselves did not ache. The care behind them did. Every charge meant planning, timing, secrecy, deliberate use of money we were supposed to be building toward our future with. The old tablet was in a kitchen drawer under takeout menus, and a spare phone charger, and a stack of coupons I kept meaning to throw away. We had used it years earlier when one streaming service felt like plenty and shared passwords felt like intimacy. I had forgotten about it. Damien had forgotten it harder. When I powered it on, the cloud sync quietly did what it had always done. Messages, notes, photos. Everything still flowing in because neither of us had bothered to disconnect the device from his account. I opened his messages and found a thread near the top from Tori Bennett. I did not recognize the name at first. By the end of 10 minutes, I knew exactly who she was. 27. Worked in his office. Started out with professional exchanges that turned almost embarrassingly fast. Drinks after a meeting. A joke that leaned too warm. Then the familiar slide into private language, private nicknames, private assumptions. I read slowly because rushing only helps the liar. 8 days before the party, she had written, "How much longer am I supposed to wait?" He wrote back, "After the birthday. I'm handling the Monica situation after the party. Just be patient." I kept staring at that line. Not because I did not understand it. Because I understood it perfectly. He had turned me into an administrative issue. A scheduling problem. A thing to be handled once he had extracted every ounce of convenience from the life I was still running for him. The party I had spent 3 months building was not something he felt guilty about accepting from me. It was part of his transition plan. I sat there with that message open and thought about the last time Damien had reached across the kitchen island, taken my wrist lightly, and said, "When this birthday is over, we should finally pick tile samples. I want us to enjoy the house while we are still young enough to enjoy it." I thought about the Saturday mornings when I brought him coffee in the blue mug he liked because it kept heat longer. I thought about how many of his career dinners I had organized, how many event budgets I had quietly trimmed so he could look generous in rooms full of clients, how many times I had stayed up late helping him polish a presentation while he talked about how hard he was working for us. Betrayal stings because of what is lost. It wounds deeper when you realize the thing being used against you is your own loyalty. My labor. My order. My ability to anticipate needs before they became problems. He had not simply lied to me. He had made a structure out of the parts of me he trusted most. He hid money because he knew I would manage the visible one carefully enough to create extra room. He carried on an affair because he knew I was the kind of wife who would remember his mother's dress size, his preferred bakery, his conference dates, his dental appointments, his dry cleaning ticket in the side pocket of his blazer. The cruelty was not technical. It was intimate. By noon that day I knew something else too. I was not going to stop the birthday party. I had thought about it for a full minute and rejected it. I had already paid too much of myself into that event to give him the satisfaction of saying I ruined his celebration before he ever had to expose himself. But I did make one quiet set of decisions. Because I managed events for a living, every vendor contract was built with phased approvals. The venue had an authorization code for any changes after the main service block. The premium bar extension required my written release. The disc jockey's second set was tied to the cake presentation, which needed my cue and final balance clearance. The photographer's overtime was optional. The late-night menu was optional. I left the dinner intact. I left the first half of the evening standing. I let him have the room, the guests, the speech, the applause, the version of himself he loved most. What I reserved for myself was a line. If he humiliated me publicly in the middle of something I had built, I would not continue financing or producing the second act of his triumph. That was not revenge. It was boundary in real time. It was the first practical decision I made on behalf of the woman he had already started treating as disposable. The venue looked exactly the way I had planned it on Saturday night. Warm light, white linens, gold accents, the custom banner over the back wall with his name on it in clean block lettering. I had placed his mother near the windows because she liked a little distance from the speakers, his older cousins near the center because they would keep the conversation moving, and his clients where the service would hit smoothly and make him look like a man whose life was beautifully under control. Tori arrived at 7:15 in a dark green dress and introduced herself near the door as a colleague from Damien's office. She was younger than I expected, not because 27 is young in some abstract way, but because youth looks different when it walks confidently into a room built by the wife of the man it is sleeping with. It looks unhurried. She moved like someone who believed time was on her side. Damien spotted her from across the room, and I watched his face change in one brief, unguarded second before the smile came back. He crossed to greet her with the same broad charm he gave everyone else, but his hand lingered at her elbow a breath too long. She was later directed to table 4, a table I had left unassigned because I was still waiting on 2 declines from out-of-town relatives. Somebody had placed her there after me. I did not have to guess who. By 8:30 the toast was over, the room had relaxed, and Damien had moved fully into the easy center of his own admiration. Younger co-workers were gathered near the bar doing things they would regret on Monday. His sales team was loud in the corner. Gloria was seated at a high top near the windows in the purple wrap dress I had helped her choose in March, talking to a woman from church. I was standing near the bar, exactly where I needed to be to cue the cake sequence and keep an eye on service flow, when Damien came up beside me with champagne on his breath, and that falsely patient smile men wear when they are about to misbehave in a way they believe they can explain later. "Can I talk to you for a second?" he asked. He shifted me half a step toward the wall as if that created privacy. It did not. 2 men from his team were 3 feet away. His mother was within earshot. Tori was close enough to see his profile. Then came the line. I was standing in the same place all night. I was barely speaking to anyone. I was making people uncomfortable by watching him. "I am watching the vendors," I said. "That is what I have been doing for 3 months. He glanced toward the room and, just once, toward table 4. "Just go home, Monica. Take the car. You are clearly not having fun." When I stayed still, his voice flattened. "Leave." That was the moment the line I had drawn on Thursday became real. Gloria found me in the parking lot after the patio scene. I had already decided I was going to drive home, take off my shoes, and start moving money before Damien could turn remorse into performance. She came toward me slowly, one hand holding the wrap of her dress closed against the night air. The lot was full of small departures, guests drifting out in pairs with lowered voices and careful eyes. "Walk with me," she said. We moved toward the edge of the lot where the light dropped off and the sound from the venue thinned. For a few seconds she said nothing. Then she folded her arms and looked straight ahead. "He is my son," she said. "I need you to know I understand that." I nodded. "The way he spoke to you in there," she went on. "The way he looked when he said it, like your pain was an inconvenience to his evening. I have seen that look before." She paused long enough for me to know the rest was going to cost her. Not from him. From his father. She did not say anything more in that moment, and she did not have to. Something passed between us anyway, not comfort exactly, but recognition. I drove home with the radio off and the kitchen light still on, and for the first time since I found the hotel charge, I let myself understand that I was not crazy, not oversensitive, and not imagining the size of what had been done to me. Damien came downstairs the next morning dressed for churchless respectability. Pressed shirt, dark slacks, watch on, face arranged into injured dignity. He did not apologize. Men like him rarely start there because apology requires admitting the other person was real all along. He poured coffee, stood at the counter, and told me he had been forced to pay almost $4,000 in penalties and used minimums and vendor fees because of what I did at the party. He said I had embarrassed him in front of clients, family, and people he had known for 15 years. He said he had only wanted me to step outside and cool off. He said everybody there saw me as unstable. I sat at the kitchen table with both hands around my mug and watched him try to reverse the shape of the truth. It was almost impressive in a technical sense. He had publicly dismissed me, privately deceived me, financially exploited me, and still found a way to present himself as the injured party before breakfast. When he finally left for work with a clipped, "Do not wait up," I listened to his car back down the driveway and disappear. Then I opened my laptop, transferred every dollar of my personal savings to a new account in my name at a different bank, changed the password on my private cloud storage, and started tracing the tax refund. We had filed jointly the previous spring and received a $4,300 refund. Damien had said he would send it straight to the mortgage principal so we could get ahead before rates shifted again. I had believed him because at the time I still thought shared planning meant shared intent. The mortgage portal showed nothing beyond regular monthly payments. No extra principal payment. Nothing. The refund hit our joint account on April 14th. 2 weeks later, $4,200 moved out into the hidden checking account under his profile at the old bank. It was so clean it almost insulted me. Next I opened the renovation account. That fund had been my idea, my budgeting, my patience, my refusal to buy the easier little luxuries that make people feel wealthy while keeping them stuck. Over 14 months, there had been 9 withdrawals totaling $5,840. The smallest was $250. The largest was $1,100. I cross-referenced every date against the hidden account activity. All 9 landed in one of Damien's concealed accounts within 72 hours. 8 of the 9 could be linked directly to affair spending or transfers that supported it. The 9th sat for a while as a buffer, which told me something too. He was not stealing impulsively. He was maintaining liquidity, building a cushion, creating options. The sharpest pain in that moment was not the money. It was realizing he had watched me build that fund statement by statement and never once flinched. That evening I went to see Felicia Ward, the attorney I knew through a former corporate client who had once hired me to rescue a retirement gala after a hotel flooded the ballroom. Felicia's office was quiet in that after-hours way professional buildings get, where every sound feels more serious because there are so few of them. I brought printed bank records, screenshots, the text thread, account histories, and a clean summary page because order is still my instinct even when my life is on fire. She read for nearly 20 minutes without speaking. Then she took off her glasses, set them carefully on the desk, and told me where I stood. The house was marital property. The renovation fund was marital property. The hidden diversion of money toward an affair and concealed accounts could support a dissipation claim. The tax refund diversion mattered. The documentation mattered more. "You have given me a better file than most accountants," she said. "That is good news and bad news. Good because the truth is traceable. Bad because the pattern is deliberate." She explained timelines, disclosure requirements, filing strategy, and the practical ugliness of untangling a marriage from a financial scheme. I paid a retainer out of the savings Damien did not know I had moved that morning. My hand shook exactly once when I signed. Felicia noticed and pretended not to. I appreciated her for that more than sympathy would have helped. From Felicia's office, I drove to Gloria's house in Hendersonville. The porch light was on, as if she had expected me all day. She opened the door before I knocked and stepped aside with none of the small social delay people usually use to make painful conversations feel less direct. The house smelled like cedar and tea. We sat in her living room with cups between us, and after a long silence, she told me the rest of what she had only hinted at in the parking lot. When Damien's father was 48, he had publicly told Gloria to leave a dinner because she was making things awkward. 2 years later, he left the marriage for a younger woman. And by then Gloria said the emotional abandonment had been going on so long the physical betrayal barely surprised her. "The cruelty starts before the affair gets obvious," she told me. "It starts when they need you to accept less dignity so they can live with what they are already doing." Then she got up, went to a narrow desk in the corner, and brought back a soft manila folder. 3 years earlier, Damien had asked her to sign paperwork connected to a consulting company. He said it was for side work and tax purposes. She had kept copies because she kept copies of everything. Inside were formation documents for ARX Advisory Group, a mailbox address in Brentwood, Damien listed as sole member, Gloria signed as registered agent for service of process. I did not yet know how much that mattered. I only knew my husband had more compartments than I had finished opening. I spread the ARX paperwork across my kitchen table on Monday night beside 2 years of Damien's corporate expense reports from the home filing cabinet. He had submitted them quarterly through Lawson Regional Group, a privately owned distribution company large enough to feel polished, small enough that the chief executive still took compliance issues personally. That mattered later. At midnight, I built a comparison sheet. By 1, I found the first fraudulent reimbursement. Then 10 more. 11 total claims across 6 quarters, all billed through slight variations of the ARX name, all attached to polished invoices for client event coordination, regional hospitality support, or advisory logistics, vague enough to pass a lazy review and specific enough to clear payment. The total came to $9,340. Some were small. A few were not. One landed the same week as the lake cabin rental. Another lined up with a jewelry charge. He had not only stolen from me. He had siphoned money from his employer through a shell company his mother had unwittingly helped formalize, and then moved those funds through the same hidden channels he used to build his exit. I sat there long after I finished the spreadsheet because that discovery changed the architecture of everything. Affairs can sometimes be framed by the person committing them as emotional confusion, weakness, a lapse. Fraud is less poetic. Fraud shows method. Fraud shows the mind at work over time. It told me the party, the lies, the secret account, the text thread, the gaslighting over breakfast, all belonged to one system. Damien was not unraveling. He was executing. He came home at 10:30 that night and found me at the table with my laptop closed, the papers already clipped and stacked. He drank water standing at the counter and did not look directly at me until he had rehearsed the right expression. "I think we should have dinner at my mother's on Wednesday," he said. "The 3 of us. Keep it civil. Talk through next steps before anything gets formal." Before anything gets formal. The phrase almost made me laugh. That was his whole strategy in one sentence. Keep me in the realm of talk while he figured out what I knew, how much time he had, and whether he could still maneuver me into some gentler, cheaper version of justice. "All right," I said. He blinked at me just once. He had expected resistance. Tears, perhaps. At minimum, questions. My calm unsettled him because it gave him nothing to rearrange. "Good," he said. Then he took his water upstairs. I stayed where I was and let the house settle around me. There is a kind of peace that arrives only when indecision dies. I did not feel healed. I felt resolved. Tuesday, I backed up every document to 2 private locations, printed an indexed binder for Felicia, and called Lawson Regional Group. The receptionist transferred me to Gregory Lawson's assistant only after I used the correct words. Documentation, reimbursement irregularities, sales division, confidential. Private companies run on trust until they do not. Gregory's assistant offered me a 15-minute meeting for Thursday at 2 in the afternoon because, as she told me in a careful voice, matters touching senior regional staff were being escalated directly. I accepted and thanked her. Then I texted Gloria to confirm Wednesday dinner. She replied almost immediately that she would make pot roast. There was something heartbreakingly ordinary about that text. The world was splitting open, and still there would be pot roast, folded napkins, a loaf of bread warming in the oven. That night I slept in the guest room with the binder on the floor beside me, not because I thought Damien would rummage through my things, but because I had started trusting my instincts more than my optimism. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up and cried once into a pillow hard enough to leave my chest sore the next day. Then I got up, washed my face, and went back to bed. Grief did not change the work in front of me. I refused to let it blur my hands. I arrived at Gloria's house 7 minutes early on Wednesday because I wanted to see the table before Damien tried to control the setting. Gloria met me at the door, took my coat, and squeezed my shoulder in a way that was not pity and not exactly family either, but was close enough to steady me. Damien was already seated at the dining table with his phone face down near his water glass and his jacket still on, as if he had not fully committed to staying. The room smelled like pot roast, onions, and 1 low floral candle on the sideboard. It was almost offensively normal. "Hey, he said when I sat down across from him. He was wearing the measured expression he used in work meetings when he wanted to project calm leadership while hiding irritation. Gloria took her seat at the head of the table. Damien cleared his throat and started on a speech about handling things like adults, staying respectful, figuring out the next few months sensibly. I let him get about 30 seconds into it. Then I opened my bag, set 3 folders on the table, and said, "I brought what I need for this conversation." His eyes dropped to the folders and came back to my face sharper than before. "Monica," he said, "this is supposed to be a discussion." "It is," I said. "I just prefer discussions where everyone is using the same facts." I opened the first folder and slid the highlighted page toward him. "The hotel charge at the Meridian Suites in Franklin," I said. "September 17th. The weekend you told me you were driving to Louisville to see Russell and his new baby." I let that sit before I placed the next pages down. "The hidden checking account under your profile at First Commonwealth. 14 months old. Payroll skimming from the last 6 months. The bracelet in October. The necklace in January. The lingerie in February. The cabin rental in August while I was at my cousin's bachelorette weekend." His face stayed still in that dangerous way practiced men keep it still when they are buying time. "You do not understand what you are looking at," he said. "I understand bank records very well," I answered. "I also understand patterns." I laid out the transaction summary in date order. "You were not confused. You were funding something." He leaned back slightly and glanced toward his mother, maybe hoping she would interrupt, soften, redirect. Gloria did not move. The silence from her side of the table was harder than accusation. It forced him to sit inside his own exposure without relief. I opened the second folder. "Our tax refund. $4,300. You told me it went to the mortgage principal. It went into the hidden account instead." I set down the refund deposit, the transfer record, and the mortgage ledger with the empty space where the supposed principal payment should have been. Then I added the renovation account statements. 9 withdrawals over 14 months, I said. Total of $5,840. Every one of them transferred into your concealed accounts within 72 hours. 8 of those 9 line up directly with spending or transfers tied to the affair. His jaw flexed once. "What affair?" he asked, and even saying that after everything else almost impressed me for its boldness. "The one with Tori Bennett," I said. The one documented in the message thread still syncing to the old tablet in my kitchen drawer. I took out printed screenshots and slid 2 of them forward. The first was the message from 11 months earlier where he told her he just needed more time and promised her weekends soon. The second was from 8 days before the party. "After the birthday. I'm handling the Monica situation after the party." I looked him straight in the face when I read it aloud. "Do you know what hurt most about that line? Not that you wanted another woman. It was that while I was coordinating your mother's menu restrictions, approving the cake design, and paying deposits for your celebration, you had already reduced me to a situation." I opened the third folder last. "ARX Advisory Group," I said. "Formed 3 years ago. Mailbox address in Brentwood. Your mother listed as registered agent." Gloria's eyes closed briefly at that, just once. I laid the reimbursement comparison sheet over the formation documents. 11 reimbursement claims submitted to Lawson Regional Group over 6 quarters. Total of $9,340. False vendor invoices. No corresponding services. Dates aligned with personal transfers and affair spending. Damien's hand moved toward the papers and stopped halfway, as if even touching them might make them more real. "Those were legitimate consulting expenses," he said, but his voice had lost all of its polished balance by then. It had gone thin. "No," I said. "Those were fabricated invoices billed through a shell company and converted into personal money." He turned toward me fully for the first time that evening, and the mask cracked. "You built a whole story out of numbers," he snapped. "That is what you do. You make columns and decide you know everything." "This is not a story," Gloria said. It was the first time she had spoken since Grace. Damien froze. She looked at him with an expression so old and tired it made the room feel smaller. "Your father once told me to leave a room because my presence made things awkward for him. I sat in my car afterward and wondered what I had done wrong. I am not doing that again. Not for you. Not to her. And I am not keeping quiet to help you protect a lie." Damien opened his mouth, then closed it. In that moment, he lost more than the argument. He lost the last woman in the room who might once have wanted to shield him. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the hardwood and picked up his phone and jacket without looking at either of us. "You have lost your mind," he said to me, but the line had no conviction left in it. It sounded like a sentence he had used before with better results. Then he walked out. The front door shut. His car started. The sound faded down the street. Gloria let out a long breath and smoothed the tablecloth with her palm. For a moment neither of us moved. Then she reached for the bread basket, put a roll on my plate, and said, "You should eat before your stomach decides it never wants to see food again." I laughed once, unexpectedly. It hurt, but it was real. We ate pot roast in that quiet dining room while the candle burned lower. Not much was said. None of it needed to be. Sometimes the first sign that you are beginning to get free is not triumph. It is appetite returning. I met Tori the next morning at a coffee shop in Hillsborough Village. I had texted from Damien's thread the night before, not to lure her cruelly, just to request 10 minutes in person because there was something she deserved to know. She arrived exactly on time in a camel coat with her hair pulled back and the careful face of a woman trying to prepare for several possible disasters at once. She knew who I was the second she saw me. Fear crossed her face first, then embarrassment, then something like determination. "I am not here to scream at you," I said once she sat down. "I am not here to make a scene." She nodded but kept both hands wrapped around an untouched cup. "I only want to give you information I would want if I were in your place." Then I told her the truth in clean order. That Damien had been promising her change for nearly a year. That 11 months earlier, he was already telling her to wait while continuing to live fully inside our marriage. That 8 days before his party, he told her again he would handle the Monica situation after the birthday. That while he was talking about a future with her, he was siphoning money from shared accounts, diverting a tax refund, and using a fake consulting company to move stolen reimbursements. I watched her face change with each piece. Not because I enjoyed hurting her. Because recognition was arriving. "He said he just needed the right time," she whispered. "No," I said. "He needed the most advantageous time. Those are not the same thing." He was not choosing between two women. He was arranging an exit that kept him comfortable for as long as possible. She stared at the table for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright and furious, not at me. "I did not know about the money," she said. "I know," I answered. "That is why I asked you here." She left 12 minutes later. She never touched the coffee. Gregory Lawson's office that afternoon was dark wood, framed awards, and old-school seriousness. He shook my hand, offered coffee, and then became a different kind of man entirely once I started laying out the documents. That is something people misunderstand about professional men sometimes. The dangerous ones are not always dramatic. The truly consequential ones go still. I put the ARX formation papers, invoice comparisons, reimbursement claims, and link transfers on his desk in the clean order I had prepared. I did not embellish. I did not weep. I walked him through the timeline the same way I would walk a client through a production budget. Gregory asked 3 sharp questions about dates, reporting lines, and access. Then he sat back and looked at me for a long time. "Mrs. Sutton," he said, "I appreciate how carefully you documented this." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me all week because he understood that documentation was not coldness. It was the shape my dignity had taken. He told me the company would open a formal internal review immediately, that I had done the right thing bringing it directly to him, and that he could not discuss personnel decisions beyond that. I thanked him, took my copies, and left. In the elevator mirror on the way down, I looked tired, older, and steadier than I had looked the week before. Sometimes strength does not glow. Sometimes it just stays standing. Friday morning, Damien was suspended pending investigation, and by 8:47 Felicia had filed for divorce with full financial disclosure attached. Every account, every transfer, the hidden banking profile, the diverted tax refund, the renovation withdrawals, the ARX records, the affair messages. Damien was served before noon. He called twice that afternoon and left one voicemail full of the usual shifting sequence. Outrage, confusion, blame, partial self-pity, and a final attempt at softness when the harder tactics did not land. I deleted it without replaying it. Tori ended things with him that same day. I learned that later through the kind of information drift that moves through shared workplaces and families, whether you invite it or not. What mattered more to me was the look on his face when he returned to collect a suit bag and a laptop from the house that evening under Felicia's temporary property guidelines. He stood in the doorway of the study, taking in the labeled boxes, the copied keys, the clean surfaces, the fact that the home he had counted on as a permanent support structure was already turning into a place governed by rules instead of access. "You did all this fast," he said. "No," I answered. "I did this carefully. The months that followed were not effortless, and I do not tell the story as if they were. There were mediation sessions that left me wrung out. There was the grief of packing 10 years of marriage into bankers' boxes and having to decide what counted as mine when so much of my identity had been wrapped around what was ours. There was the indignity of inventorying flatware, the ugliness of reading Damien's sworn financial disclosures beside mine, the frustration of hearing him try to minimize the affair as personal misconduct, while his lawyer avoided the reimbursement fraud like it might stain the table. Felicia did not let him escape into vagueness. She walked the mediator through the dissipation claim dollar by dollar, laid out the renovation fund theft, the tax refund diversion, and the economic benefit he had extracted while concealing the affair. Gloria submitted a statement confirming the ARX paperwork and, more painfully, confirming what she had heard and seen at the party and at dinner. The house sold in a good market. I cried once after the closing, not because I wanted the marriage back, but because I had loved the kitchen we never got to renovate. Even justice carries cost. But by the time the settlement was signed, the numbers reflected something honest at last. The stolen renovation money was credited back. The broader dissipation was recognized. I did not walk away rich. I walked away repaid enough to start on solid ground instead of in a crater Damien had dug under me. I signed the lease on my office 9 months after the filing. Callaway Event Planning and Consulting. My maiden name over the door because by then I wanted to stand inside something that belonged fully to me. The office was not big, but every inch of it answered to my own systems. 2 desks. Shelving by event type. Color-coded binders. A round table near the window for clients. An intake process that had lived in my head for years while I was quietly making other people look polished. I hired an assistant in the spring, and on her first day she looked at the master planning board on the wall and said, half laughing, "This is genius." I had to turn away for a second before I answered because there is a particular ache in being seen clearly for something you once gave away for free. Gloria started calling every Tuesday morning. Sometimes to recommend someone from church who needed a retirement dinner or family reunion coordinated. Sometimes to ask whether I had eaten lunch. Sometimes just to tell me her tomatoes were failing again. We almost never talked about Damien. That was its own mercy. Love, when it returns after betrayal, does not always come in romantic form. Sometimes it comes from the woman who raised the man who hurt you and decided she would rather stand with truth than blood. Damien's internal review concluded 6 weeks after my meeting with Gregory Lawson. Documented expense fraud. Systematic. Not small. He was terminated. His industry was the kind where men liked to pretend relationships mattered more than reputation until a scandal proved otherwise. He found work eventually, but it was smaller, flatter, farther from the polished future he had once built speeches around. The biggest consequence, though, was not the title he lost. It was the audience. His mother no longer covered for him. Tori no longer believed in him. I no longer organized his world into something smooth enough to live inside. On what would have been our 10th anniversary, a text from him lit up my phone while I was still at the office reviewing proposals for a 2-day corporate retreat. "Hope you're doing well. Thinking about you today." That was all. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just a man reaching toward the nearest version of old warmth and hoping he could still find me there. I read it once, set the phone face down, and went back to work. An hour later I locked up, stepped onto the sidewalk, and looked up at the sign over my door catching the streetlight. The next Friday was my business's 1st anniversary. Felicia was coming. Gloria was coming. My assistant had already ordered a cake. The details were handled because I had handled them myself. That was the thing Damien never understood until it was too late. He did not lose me in one dramatic night at his birthday party. He lost the woman who had been holding his life together long before he ever thought to call her a problem. And when I finally walked away, I took my order, my labor, my loyalty, and my future with me. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.